In that historical night, Aphrodite Krishnakant made 4 records. She was the first slum girl to be crowned Miss Mumbai or Maharashtra. She was the first Muslim girl to win the beauty contest, and the first low-caste Muslim girl to win the honorable title. Finally, she was the first 19-years-old Indian girl with a bank balance of over 400 crores of rupees plus many mansions and a 15-floor-story building overseas in her possession. Even the daughter of the richest Indian man, Anil Ambani, didn't have a bank balance of 403 crores of rupees when she was 19 years old. Now the big question that was in the mind of everyone was, how did the slum girl amass such unbelievable wealth? Rani Krishna stressed upon her daughter not to reveal to anyone the sources of her great fortune. She reminded her that 30 crores of her fortune was blackmail money. She also worried that the Indian government might conspire with the Saudi government and confiscate the money that she had inherited. Besides that, Rani told her daughter the Mumbai police might falsely accuse her of arranging the murder of her Saudi husband in prison. Unable to argue with her mother's logic, she agreed to keep quiet. They both rehearsed the scenario with responses along the lines of, "It is a private and confidential matter, and I will not discuss personal issues with anyone." Even without her confirmation, the media obviously guessed that she had inherited the king's ransom from her late Saudi husband. Of the 4 groundbreaking records that Aphrodite Krishnakant had amassed that night, the media had a field day reporting on her wealth and her humanitarian project for the poor of Mumbai. They reported on the construction of her building, the benefit of new housing for poor residents and their children, and the kitchen that allowed them access to free meals. Given her background, the media was touched to hear that she was also going to provide for their education. According to her project plans, the school was to be housed inside the building being constructed. The plans called for canteens serving nutritious food, laundry facilities, and clothes distribution facilities, a small clinic and hospital, among other benefits. Her plan was to call every child in her building her child. She was even prepared to adopt him/her legally and give her last name to any child who didn't have one or didn't have a family and homeless. Her daughters would be accommodated in a separate building from her boys. No child would receive any money. Rani convinced Aphrodite that if she gave money to her children, the Gondas would rob it from them. To avoid this kind of abuse and misuse of her money, she would not give cash to any child. She would provide her children with free accommodations, food, clothing, medical treatment, and education. The plans already called for a small private hospital in her building and for a small army of doctors and nurses to run it. Her building would be built in the largest slum area in Dharavi. It would be 17 stories high with 500 rooms, each housing whole families or children in bunk beds. The 3rd floor plan was reserved for a school, a hospital, and canteens. The 1st and 2nd floors were designated for offices, shops, and a supermarket for businesses to rent. The rentals would be used to finance similar projects in other areas. She had long-term plans calling for the construction of other similar charitable buildings. This first jewel in her crown would be called the Mahatma Gandhi Children's Shelter. Her children would be accommodated on all 14 floors. Access to certain floors and the children would be restricted to authorized personnel and the maidservants and menservants only. The menservants and maidservants would be employed from Mumbai slums and shawls. The servants would be allowed to eat their meals in the restaurants without charge while working in the building. Likewise, they were all entitled to use the washrooms. Although India allowed child labor, the children of Aphrodite Krishnakant would not be put to work with the exception of domestic chores. They would be taught and expected to care for their clothes, shoes, beddings, and other belongings. Moreover, the older children would be taught how to bathe and take care of the younger ones or bathed by nannies. Her children's clothes and other linens would be washed by washerwomen. The basic idea of Aphrodite Khan's project indicated that this was a deliberate and detailed plan. Many did not fail to see that. As soon as she was crowned Miss Mumbai, the construction of her charitable building accelerated. The construction of the building was scheduled for a year. Meanwhile, Aphrodite began to prepare herself for the Miss India beauty contest. Her mother suddenly became agreeable after being part of her daughter's victory over both the contestants and the unwritten rules of the Society of the ITC Maratha Hotel in Andheri East. Being a mother first and foremost, she jumped in with the preparations. She hired a special private tutor to coach her in India's most urgent problems and politics. She also told the tutor to educate her slum daughter on current world issues. She resumed her daughter's language instruction with the appointment of very qualified private teachers in Hindi and English. She advised her daughter, for the time being, she should forget about starring in the movie of Ifat Khan and the noble project of Aphrodite Khan and concentrate on her education and preparation for the beauty contest of Miss India. Moreover, Rani assured Aphrodite that she would follow up on the progress of her project and she would continue preparing for the movie. After all, the current events would be a wonderful ending to her story. While preparations for future events were ongoing, Rani Krishna decided to pursue two legal disputes regarding her daughter. One dispute was abroad and one local. She appointed a good lawyer and asked him to start a legal dispute against Mrs. Mahmud Khan. In her lawsuit, she demanded as compensation half the property and bank balance of the deceased Mahmud Khan for kidnapping, imprisoning, raping and brutalizing her daughter. Moreover, she appointed another lawyer to deal with her daughter's property in Saudi Arabia. She told the lawyer that her daughter had 3 houses and 1 building in Jeddah in her name. She wanted him to contact the appropriate authority in Jeddah and claim the houses and building of her daughter. She wanted the property to be sold and the money deposited in her daughter's account at her bank in Zurich. Both lawyers informed Rani Krishna that the disputes would take a long time before the courts could render judgment. So, she waited. 3 months after her crowning, Miss Mumbai flew to Bangalore city. Bangalore was host to the national beauty pageant of Femina Miss India. She was, as always, accompanied by her mother, Rani Krishna. This annual contest is organized by the Femina Miss India magazine, and 3 winners are selected to represent India globally. The first winner would compete in Miss World, the second winner in Miss Universe, and the third winner in Miss Earth. In the past, the magazine would select a 4th winner to represent the country in Miss Asia Pacific. In 2006, Miss Asia was discontinued, obviating the need for a 4th winner. Among the 3 international beauty pageants, Miss World had the biggest global fan base and drew the attention of many feminine groups. Miss Earth, Miss Universe, and Miss World were 3 beauty pageants that were organized every year around the world. The idea behind these pageants was to identify girls of determination and beauty to represent the country among the international equivalents and similar perspectives. These beauties are expected to play the role of ambassadors and messengers of goodwill. The winner of the Miss India Earth title represents the nation at a continental level, which was more region-specific. The winner of the Miss World India, on the other hand, represents the nation at an international level and the platform was similar to that shared by the winner of the Miss India Universe. The only distinguishable difference between the two was the implication of the terms universe and world. The representative for Miss World was usually filled by the winning contestant at the national level, while the first runner-up represented the country for the Miss Universe pageant, and the second runner-up would compete in the Miss Earth contest. The 3 young Indian girls chosen each year were not only beautiful but also committed to represent the rich traditions, culture, and values of India on an international platform. The contestants for Femina Miss India came from all over India. Each state or region boasted in their particular representative. Delhi was the only city that provided a contestant. As the capital city, it was also a district, in much the same way as Washington, D.C. Aphrodite Khan had last competed with girls from Mumbai and other cities in her state such as Pune, Nagpur, Aurangabad, etc. Beating them, gave her the honour of being Maharashtra's candidate. From day one, everyone that saw her knew that she was going to be the winner. Of course, the centric Mumbai and Bollywood supporters were already predicting her victory as Miss India. There were 3 contestants selected, all of which could potentially win. They hailed from Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Punjab. Everything went well for the slum girl, except one particularly unexpected incident. It was during a press conference after she was crowned Miss World India. A female Hindu journalist, who made it her business to know everything about the new Miss India, asked her a question. She simply asked her what she would call a man who would marry and sleep with a 9-year-old girl. The question was loaded with religious innuendo and meant to trap the former child bride. Aphrodite felt like a dagger had been inserted into her wounded heart. It reminded her of her early years, and in that instant she began to relive the life she had lived with her Saudi husband. She answered in anger, her words blunt and gritting her teeth, "I will call him my foot." "You mean you will put him under your foot?" "Yes. But if he said that he had followed the example of his prophet? Every man who sleeps with a 9-year-old girl is my foot. Do you not know that your prophet Muhammad slept with his wife, Aisha, when she was 9 years old and he was 54? I don't know that, but if what you have said is true about the prophet Muhammad, then he wasn't different from any other evil man who sleeps with a 9-year-old girl, and he too will be under my foot. Even though he is your holy prophet, will you still call him that? Prophet is my foot." In India, when someone says in anger, "Prophet is my foot," it is the same as someone in the West saying in anger, "Prophet, my ass." But if he quotes for you a verse from his religious book which allows him to marry and sleep with a girl who has not yet reached puberty, will you still protest against such a marriage? Surat al-Talaq 65:4. I will spit on a verse that says anything like that. Rani Krishna was incensed at the journalist. She was manipulating her daughter to get the answers she wanted. Nothing sells magazines like sex and religion. Now Aphrodite Khan was in a position to be interpreted by Muslims as insulting their prophet Muhammad and blaspheming their holy book. Therefore, she stepped in and asked the female journalist to stop asking her daughter those religiously charged questions. Aphrodite Krishna Khan knew very little about her Islamic religion. She spent most of her life under the captivity of an old Saudi Muslim who kidnapped and raped her from a very tender age. All she knew was that she was a Muslim girl, her prophet was called Muhammad, her religious book was known as the Quran, and her God is Allah. She used to hear her Saudi husband reciting the Quran in a loud voice, especially during the month of Ramadan. While she was living with him, he always prayed 5 times a day. He forced her to fast during the Ramadan months and to pray 5 times in a day. He taught her a few short chapters of the Quran and trained her how to use those verses in her prayers during Ramadan. However, after Ramadan was over, he never asked her to pray. Anyway, her answers on the day after her crowning, Miss India, Aphrodite Khan, created fury in the hearts of Muslims. She was accused of blasphemy and considered to be an apostate from Islam. Some Muslim mullahs called for her death for insulting the Prophet Muhammad and their holy Quran. On the following day, Muslims filled the streets of Indian cities calling for the prosecution of Aphrodite Khan. Some of them demanded that she should be dethroned as Miss India. Once more, Aphrodite Khan was plunged into another series of nightmares. It's no exaggeration to say that almost every Muslim in Mumbai wanted to assassinate her. Following her return from Bangalore, she went underground. Her Bandera residence required round-the-clock police protection. Mother and child were advised not to venture out of their homes. Meanwhile, Muslims thronged the city demanding that Aphrodite Khan be hanged for insulting their prophet and holy book. Some wanted her dethroned and stripped of her Miss India crown. Neither the government of Maharashtra, nor the government of India was swayed. A great many politicians and lawmen were interviewed extensively on this controversial issue. Some of them admitted that Aphrodite Khan had spoken disrespectfully about the Prophet Muhammad and the Quran, but what she said wasn't against Indian law. It was a personal opinion and she was entitled to her opinion. They argued that, many times some non-Hindu Indians equated the Hindu goddesses with prostitutes and none were ever prosecuted for their opinions. Dr. Ambedkar, the father of the Indian Constitution, was cited as just such an example. In spite of the nationwide protests of Muslims, Aphrodite Khan retained her crown and reigned for the year. She was scheduled to fly after 3 months to the United Kingdom to participate in yet another pageant in London. The 3 months preceding the flight, she only went out of her house twice. Once she appeared at the Mumbai High Court on matters pertaining to the lawsuit that her mother submitted against the late Mahmud Khan. For Miss India's protection, the trial was closed to the public. The court ruled in her favour and she was granted a compensation of 50 crores of rupees. Mrs. Khan paid the amount reluctantly, adamantly protesting that she should not have to pay the blasphemer of their holy prophet and sacred Quran and to the girl that caused the death of her loyal son and husband. When the trial was over and while Miss India was leaving the High Court, a young Muslim man threw a hand grenade at her car. The grenade exploded a couple of meters behind her car, and she and the car escaped damage. Beggars and street children close by were not so fortunate and sustained some serious injuries and deaths. The cowardly terrorist attack on Miss India's car prompted some to suggest to her mother that she should take her daughter and migrate to the West. Rani Krishna announced that she and her daughter were both born in India and they would live and die in India. The second time Aphrodite Khan stepped out of her house was on the trip from Mumbai to London. For safety reasons, she was provided a military escort courtesy of the government of Maharashtra. The security at the airport was at its peak with the airport practically emptied of all but key workers and personnel. All those authorized to enter were searched from head to toe before gaining admittance. The airport was subject to a police cordon of more than 5 hours until Miss India's plane took off. The passengers of that flight were carefully searched before they were allowed to board the plane. For the first time, the Mumbai Chhatrapati Shivaji International Airport Authority exercised executive privilege and did not allow any Muslim passenger to travel on the same plane. When the plane took off, Rani Krishna touched the hand of her daughter assuring her that they had left India safely. Then, she whispered in her ear saying that, "Now we are going to a country where there will be no worry or fear for our lives." Aphrodite felt so happy when her mother assured her that where they were going there would be no fear of Muslim terrorists. Rani said to her that in the West, the police departments were efficient, powerful, and skilled, which was why their citizens enjoyed such a high standard of living. Unlike India, she explained, a person's life is always subject to danger. They were looking forward to moving freely without the shadow of the threat of Islamic terrorists. Aphrodite felt as if she was traveling out of a city full of ghosts and heading to a city full of angels. She wished that her mother would change her mind and move to the West. She just wanted to be as far as possible from those who wanted to take her life for speaking the truth about their prophet and their Quran. Ever since uttering her remarks about Islam, she tried to understand her transgression, which had, in effect, caused every Muslim in India to hate her to the point of calling for her execution. She remembered saying that every man who slept with a 9-year-old girl is under her foot. She remembered adding, in the heat of the moment, "I will spit on a verse which allows a grown-up man to sleep with a small girl who hasn't yet had her period." She asked herself, if Muslims know that their prophet slept with a 9-year-old girl, then why are they angry? Moreover, if there is a verse in their Quran, which allows men to sleep with underage girls, then why are they not ashamed of it? Why would they want to kill a person who condemned such a verse? Surat al-Talaq 65:4. These unanswered questions were still troubling her when their plane arrived at Heathrow International Airport. When the plane rolled to a stop, Rani Krishna took hold of her daughter's hand, disembarked and headed to the arrival hall. The two of them remembered their previous visit when no one knew who they were. This time, things were vastly different. Rani knew that as the beauty queen of India, her daughter was going to be received by a special delegate. She expected that the civilized British Indians would come to the international airport to receive Miss India and wish her well. She thought some of them would come to receive her daughter with garlands of beautiful flowers in their hands and put them around her neck. Many of them might be honored by having their pictures taken with Miss India. Rani was praying to God that her daughter would be crowned Miss World. She was halfway on her road to fulfilling her dreams after winning the titles of Miss Mumbai and Miss India. It all started by a little far-fetched idea that was put into her daughter's head by an Arab man who suggested she try out for the Miss World competition, and assured her that she would win what every little girl in the world always dreamed of. Rani and her daughter walked inside the arrival hall with their heads held high. As soon as they stepped outside the airport followed by 3 British police officers, they were assaulted by a group of British Muslims. Many of them Indians. They were showered with rotten eggs and spoiled tomatoes. Aphrodite's face was covered in foul-smelling eggs and tomatoes. She clutched her face and began to cry. The Muslims continued to throw eggs and rotten vegetables at them. The British police could not prevent the thousands of Muslim protesters who had gathered outside the airport from venting their anger and insane viciousness. To defuse the situation, the police pulled Aphrodite by the hand and took her back inside the arrival hall again. Rani was shocked at the breach and lack of security. She realized that anyone in the mob of Muslims could potentially have had a knife or a gun and they would not stop until they had killed her daughter. Muslims in London ironically have more freedom to terrorize people than in the Muslim countries. This quirk has to do with freedom of expression. It is odd that Muslims denounce non-Muslim governments and societies, but flock to immigrate to non-Muslim countries where they can enjoy personal liberties not available in their own homeland. When British troops returned from Iraq, British Muslims received them at the airport with words of condemnation. They were called cowards, rapists, terrorists, butchers, and murderers. They shouted for them all to go to hell where their fallen brethren of British comrades were already burning in the flames of hellfire. Recently British Muslims openly challenged the London police and shouted on their faces, "British police go to hell. Freedom of speech go to hell." Looking at the number of Muslim protesters who came to berate and condemn the beauty queen for insulting their prophet and deriding their holy Quran, the crowd was 10 times larger and 10 times angrier. Rani Krishna preferred to take her daughter and return to her country rather than walking out of London International Airport without enough police protection to face a mob. Scenarios of someone firing a gun or splashing acid crossed her mind. She said a short prayer of thanksgiving that none of the protesters actually fired a weapon at them and that they were not stoned to death just for being alive. At first, Rani asserted they would not spend another minute on British soil and demanded the same flight that brought them, take them back to India immediately. She asked the 2 representatives of the beauty pageant who had come to receive Miss India, how could they allow her daughter to be attacked by a bunch of heathens, to endure unprovoked violence, and suffer humiliation and death threats? She bristly stood her ground, loudly voicing her dissatisfaction at the fact that only 3 British police officers were sent to accompany them to their destination. Rani changed her mind when the British officers summoned the necessary reinforcements and seemed to have gotten the upper hand and brought the situation under their control. The British police did not expect Muslims to come to the airport on the day the Miss India contestant arrived. No one announced her arrival and hence the police did not anticipate any well-wishers to show up at the airport. It was clear that the Muslims and Indian citizens had access to good intelligence and had received information from their friends and relatives in Mumbai about the beauty queen's arrival. It was obvious some of the leading British imams sounded the alarm and instigated the uprising by urging their congregations to go to the international airport and protest the blasphemy allowed in the land of infidels. That day, Aphrodite Khan, her mother, and the 2 British receptionists were escorted out of the Heathrow International Airport with more than 30 police officers. The police created a human barricade to protect Miss India and her entourage. As they left the airport, Rani saw the Muslim protesters carrying signs and banners with inflammatory words. "Go home, prostitute of Bollywood! Death to the blasphemer of our religion and prophet! Death to Miss India! Islam will dominate the world! Death to the apostatized Muslim woman, Miss India!" The shoe of our holy prophet is better than Aphrodite Krishna Khan. Some protesters had caricatures and effigies with placards reading, Aphrodite Krishna is not a Muslim. Miss India is the Tawaif of Bollywood. Miss India is an Iranian. Miss India is a Hindu. The shoe of our Prophet Muhammad is more honorable to us than Miss India. Walking through the surging crowd, abusive insults rained upon Rani and the beauty queen. Boarding the bus that was to take them to the hotel, they watched as the crowd of angry bearded men and veiled women in black burqas surrounded the bus and battered it with their hands, chanting rhythmically, as if in a trance. Rani and Aphrodite began to panic. Their eyes darted all over the crowd, expecting one of them to toss a hand grenade through the glass windows or for a suicide bomber to gain entrance to the bus. Even in Mumbai, Rani and Aphrodite had never experienced such a raw display of hatred and violence. They had never been exposed to an organized mob such as this. Rani regretted listening to the London police, and now her daughter was in mortal danger. Trying to save her daughter from the worst of it, she tried to hide her fear and downplay the events unfolding around her, hoping her daughter would not go berserk. She was shocked that despite the terrorists attacking the bus and the threats written on the banners which called for the death of Miss India, the police of London did not make any arrest or have the offensive banners removed. She knew that in India such banners would surely result in the Mumbai police arresting the perpetrators and torturing them for inciting the murder of an innocent citizen. However, the UK police were powerless to act given the provisions of personal freedom to protest and the ideal of freedom of speech. It seemed to Rani, unless someone killed or maimed Miss India, the police of London would just sit on their rumps and protect the constitutional rights of British Muslims to threaten to kill an innocent human being. Even in the mayhem, the irony and hypocrisy was not lost to her.